Alright guys, for this short video we're going to be talking about Egypt geography. In this quick video we're going to be looking at where Egypt is located, the importance of the Nile River in Egypt, and we'll conclude with talking about how the Nile River is used today. Let's go ahead and begin. Alright, so first and foremost, Egypt is located and found on the continent of Africa in the northeastern corner. And as we've discussed, about 90% of Egypt is covered in desert. So here in the area that I just circled is roughly where Egypt is found. And as you can see, with the exception of the Nile River going down the middle, it is comprised of deserts on both sides. Now, it is also home to the Nile River, which is the longest river in the world. And it runs a length of approximately 4,160 miles long. Here's another close-up view of, as I said in the previous slide, Egypt is found in the top right-hand corner. And then on the picture on the left, here you have a overshot view of Egypt with the Nile River and showing us where along the Nile River it is its most fertile. All right, annual flooding. Every year from June through September, the Nile River floods and overruns its banks. This is very similar to the Tigris and Euphrates River in Mesopotamia, in how every year the rivers would flood and they would create massive damage. It damaged homes, fields, people's lives were lost. And just like in Mesopotamia, the Nile River floods provided rich, fertile soil that was perfect for farming. Prior to science, the Egyptians believed that the flooding was caused by the tears of a goddess Isis who cried for her dead husband Osiris. We'll talk more about that and those two gods specifically at a future date, but just like we talked about before, they also used religion as a way to explain why things happened. But the most important thing to remember is that these floods would leave behind rich, fertile soil. Ancient Mesopotamian farming. Thanks to the thick black soil left behind from the floods, this area was perfect for farming. For some reason, we tend to think that if an area has black soil, that it's bad for farming, when in reality, it actually makes it perfect. And just like in Mesopotamia, the Nile River provided fresh drinking water, provided food from fishing and other animals. It provided transportation, irrigation for crops, and you had sanitation. So very, very almost identical to Mesopotamia. Now, the Egyptians divided their calendar into 3 seasons. The first one was Aket, which was the rainy season, and this is when the floods occurred the most. Then you had the Peret. This is kind of the middle season. This is where they did their early planting, getting the fields ready. And then lastly, they had Shem, which was their dry season, and was also the season where they would harvest and where it would be much, much hotter and drier. Now, thanks to the rich fertile soil, crops that were raised by ancient Egyptians were barley, wheat, lentils, chickpeas, onions, garlic, and palm dates, which is a type of fruit that grows off palm trees. Here you have another picture of just showing the area next to the Nile River being known as the Black Lands. And these Black Lands, which we'll discuss here in the next slide, were the fertile areas of land next to the Nile River. The ancient Egyptians considered the Nile the lifeline of Egypt. The Black Lands. The Black Lands name comes from the dark color of the soil. Floodwaters after every rainy season left deposits of rich minerals and nutrients, what made it possible for them to grow so many crops. And just like the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians dug canals so that they could hold and trap floodwater to irrigate their crops. Here on the right, you have a picture of an artist's rendition of what farming would have looked like in ancient Egypt. Here and down behind, you have the Nile River, and then here you have people working the field, harvesting the wheat, and so forth. Here you have an example, two images where they used contraptions like these to get water to their crops. On the next day, on Tuesday, we're actually going to take a look at how these machines worked to provide water for their crops using these canals. Now, we're also going to talk about the Redlands. Now, Egyptians called the desert that surrounded them on the east and the west the Redlands due to the reddish color of the sand. Now, this terrain, unlike the Blacklands, was very harsh and it received very little rain. However, even though it was a hard place to live in, the desert gave them places to mine for gold and jewels. So they would actually dig deep underground, and this is where they found a lot of their riches. Another advantage of having the Redlands right outside the Blacklands was because it was sandy, it was hot, very little rain. It also protected them from invading armies, which was a huge advantage up until the Greeks and the Romans invaded from the north via the Mediterranean Sea. But it always made other enemies of Egypt double back, or made them think twice about invading Egypt, because they would have to travel through these deserts. Today, the Nile River doesn't flood annually like it used to in the past, and that's because in 1970 they built the Aswan Dam, which helped control the flooding of the Nile River. With this dam, they also help provide electricity for millions of people along the Nile River. And because it's controlled, now they don't have to just grow or farm for part of the year. Now they can continue to farm pretty much all year round. And because of that, farming is still important along the Nile River. Today, most of Egypt's population lives along the Nile River. It's one of the reasons why I included this picture down on the bottom right. This is an aerial view of Egypt from space, and you can see that all along the Nile River, this area here and the Nile River Delta, this is where people tend to live. This is where most cities in Egypt are found, because it just shows us how it looks like at night, which is crazy to believe, because most of Egypt is pitch black minus a few isolated spots, which is crazy. All right, guys. So that's it on geography of Egypt. Make sure you answer the questions. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.